All right, so it should be recording now.
Excellent.
So when you started at Drivewyze, Grant, were you, like when I first met you, you were helping with the mobile meetup? Were you always into
Yeah.
DevOps at Drivewyze, or were you mobile first and then you migrated there?
I started out doing some web applications, and then when that was done, I moved on to some other, just back-end services. And then as the company grew, and we decided we had to switch to a better infrastructure, I kind of started doing that and fell into DevOps, and then I've been dabbling ever since.
Oh, okay. You've been with Drivewyze like almost since the beginning of the company. You've been there quite a while, haven't you?
I've been there for about 4.5 years. I don't know I don't think that's quite the beginning of the company, but it's sort of the beginning when customers started coming on. I got to skip out on some of the hard work.
Like what? Trying to find paying customers?
Yeah, yeah. Although we have some really good people, so they did that really well, and the developers didn't have to worry too much about that, I don't think.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. Right on. We'll see if anyone. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So I was working on some backend services, and Dean Bittner from Run With It was working with us. So I jumped in to doing some load testing, and thought that was pretty cool. So when we started moving to Amazon, a lot of the skills from load testing kind of carried over.
Oh, okay, that's cool. And that kind of got you excited and interested in DevOps, and
Yeah. And then getting into sort of the infrastructure as code was like super exciting. Being able to spin up machines just through config files and stuff is wonderful. And then when Kubernetes came out, it was like, whoa, we don't have to worry about hardware anymore. This is great.
oh, that's good to hear. What's like, I don't, without revealing any proprietary information, what does Drivewyze use for their DevOps and for their infrastructure?
So we have a bit of a mix. So we use Terraform for like the virtual machines in Amazon.
Sorry, excuse my ignorance. What's Terraform?
Terraform is a tool by HashiCorp. It gives you a config that builds infrastructure. So it's very similar to CloudFormation that Amazon has, although it's like platform agnostic. So you can use a Terraform config, or at least the Terraform config syntax and tooling to build, Google Cloud and Azure and other services like that. It has a really good config language. It's a HashiCorp markup language, which is quite nice to use. It has typing and syntax checking. It's a little more structured than JSON. And then we have Salt for pulling down config onto servers. So that does some like user management and like setting up applications. Salt is a little bit like Ansible or Puppet. And then we have, and then we started getting into Kubernetes recently. So we have a couple of those things. We're just using vanilla Terraform configs. At home, I've been playing around with some of the higher level stuff like Rancher, which kind of gives you a UI for building Kubernetes config. So yeah, it's really cool.
Oh, that sounds, because I dabbled with Kubernetes a little bit, and that's one of the more confusing things is setting up the config file. So Rancher is really helpful?
Yeah, I really like it. It can even provision your Kubernetes clusters and sets everything up, which is even better. So you run a single Docker container for, to set up Rancher, and then all of a sudden, it just builds everything else for you.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hello. Sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name there.
That's Yifeng. He works at Drivewyze.
Oh, hi, Yifeng. I was just communicating us through
So,
chat, I guess. Off to
yeah,
soccer. Do you guys have like a lunch soccer game at Drivewyze?
yeah, we do. Summertime it's soccer, and then I think when it gets colder, it turns into more games and stuff.
Oh, like board games and stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Secret Hitler was a really popular for a while. Poker started to take over.
Oh. One game you might like is called Coup, if you like kind
Ooh,
of bluffing games.
we do like bluffing games here.
Yeah, COUP. Yeah. Well, before you run off to soccer, Yifeng, do you have a question for Grant? Or are you just here to support him? No, just
Thank you for the support.
just here for the support. Oh, okay.
Fung is taking over a lot of the DevOps stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's getting into Kube and Terraform, which is pretty awesome. All right, see ya.
Right. So this Terraform, do you have an example you could show? I'm super curious about this.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll just post a link in here so you can take a look at the official docs. But I believe I have example. I can show how. Actually, show how I set up Kubernetes.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. And you can share your screen at the bottom. There's a little green share button.
Yeah, sweet. I will do that once I have things set up. All right. Okay. So that's good. And
I'll take a quick look at Terraform here. So is this like a software service? I'm not even 100% sure what this is.
it's just a command line tool that sets up things.
Ah, perfect. I can see your screen now.
All right. Cool. Yeah. So yeah, this is just inside of our. This is our test environment kube structure. We keep on doing iterations, so every version is a little bit different. But right now, the high level things that you need to know about Terraform is you have providers that will show that kind of tell it how to interact with the environment. So we have we store everything, all the state, so how it keeps track of things in S3. And then you can link to other environments. So like we're linking to our internal corporation network or internal, yeah, for that's in Amazon. And this just kind of sets up everything so that can be used. And then for every piece, you have a file and you can put some config in it. So for the virtual private cloud that you have in Amazon, you can set it up so you can have, the sitter. You can choose what's supported and what's not. Basically, everything that you can do in the UI for Amazon, you can do here.
Okay.
Although the UI does a lot of things that you don't have to worry about and that you have to worry about in here. So you have to do kind of like spend a little bit more time and add more variables than what you would, initially expect that are, kind of hand out automatically.
Oh, okay. So it's like a way of automating and command line, like automating your Amazon deployments, right?
Exactly.
Does it just work for just Amazon or?
No, it works with everything, and it's also pluggable, so you can write your own kind of like modules to do different things. So this is our Kubernetes. Terraform does things sort of by folder. So it kind of will apply everything inside of a folder at once, unless you specify very specifically what not to, or what to deploy. So if I was, going back, I'd have more modular like folder for each individual element. That way, it's faster and you don't risk breaking things. So here is the master, like how we set up the master piece for Kubernetes. So there's some policies, some roles that you need, some security groups. If you're familiar with Amazon, there's security groups everywhere. And then that's pretty much it. Like where did that go? Yeah, this is like the bread and butter. This creates the master, or the Kubernetes master. And that's through EKS, so it's managed service. You don't have to worry about anything. Amazon hosts etcd, the Kube API, and everything else. So you don't really have to worry about it. You just have to build and manage the worker nodes. So we have another file for that.
So you have to know Amazon pretty well, or whatever provider you're using, right? Because you have to know all the commands and all the options to pass in.
No, it's not too bad. HashiCorp has documentation for all that. It's gonna look like, depending on what you're doing. So like with EKS, it's a little more unknown. It's not an official plugin, which makes it harder. But like most of this stuff is all just generic Amazon. So the policies, you need to know kind of what you're doing, which is always a struggle because they're so complicated. But when you get down to like some stuff, it's pretty basic. Like this is for creating the AMI worker. So you just specify like what AMI you want, and then Terraform automatically finds the latest version. This is sort of our config for like setting up a node. So the CloudFormation piece. And then all our worker nodes are set up as launch configurations and auto scale groups. So, these are all things that you would set up, manually or with CloudFormation, and Terraform is very similar to the CloudFormation setup, and it just kind of works, which is quite exciting. So you deploy this, and then you have, Kubernetes within, 5 minutes. With Terraform, so there's docs. Keep kind of changing things around. So providers, so like you can see, like there's a ton of things that it works with. So if we go to Amazon, here is everything that you could possibly want for Amazon. So authentication and credentials and everything else. So like if you wanted to build an S3 bucket, you could go, sorry. These are data sources. Oh, okay, maybe that is there. So for S3, where that went? That didn't help. So S3, so there's data source. So you can S3 buckets. Let me click on that. Okay, here we go. Oh man, I don't even know where it's going here. Yeah, here we go. S3 bucket. So you can set up a Route 53 record. But this is data source. Okay, sorry. I will say that here we go. They keep on changing their docs so that they look different. Here we go. So in order to create a Amazon bucket, that's all you need to do. And then you go Terraform apply, and it'll just build that and be ready to go. And then there's more options, so you can have different policies and you can start adding more information. If you need to add cores, so if you're using this for a website or something, it just like goes out here. It kind of you just build on things and you keep on adding more and more and more. So it's quite good, really flexible. The nice thing is that once you have this, you can just like delete stuff and rebuild stuff. You can have, you change a couple variables for where you're pointing to, like the different accounts. I just go Terraform apply and I'll just build everything for you and you don't have to worry.
So how would you do that in like a production environment? Like you obviously wouldn't want to bring everything down. Does Terraform support like slowly migrating, like load balancing or anything? How would you do that in production? Like development makes sense because you can blow everything away and just recreate it, right?
Yeah. If you already have an environment set up and you want to slowly move to Terraform for management, you can actually import resources into Terraform. There's a command line Terraform import, and then you give it like a string, and it'll import the thing into Terraform, and then you can start writing config, and then it'll manage it. Every time you make a change, Terraform just looks at the diff. So if you have your entire production on Terraform and you want to add a new machine, you'd add a new machine, it would see the diff and build a new machine. It wouldn't touch anything else. So like it's incremental, I guess. It incrementally builds everything. You don't have to worry. Sometimes if things break, it will tell you, it doesn't handle the rollback, so you have to go and like fix it. But if you have things partitioned properly, if you're not changing all the networking stuff that doesn't change very often, that can be kind of squirreled away in one place. You can have your machines in another place so that if you do delete something, you're not going to take down everything. But I'm sure other people have different opinions on on that stuff. It's quite flexible in how you architect.
Oh, okay. But like say like you made a change, so you have like maybe a staging environment and production environment, and you wanted to make a change on a server. So you would put that in the Terraform file and then like run that on staging and test it, and then would you run that also and then switch it and run the same one on production?
You could do that, yeah. So we have like each environment is a little more customized, so it's a little hard to do that. You can also just when you are working on Terraform, you can run Terraform plan, and that'll show you what it's going to do, and then you can go Terraform apply, and then it'll actually do the stuff. So you can double check what Terraform is going to do, what it thinks it's going to do.
Okay.
So if you're trying to scale up a web server machine, it'll tell you, hey, this machine is going to go from M5 large to a M5 extra large. And it will you'll have to know, I think, yourself that change will mean turning it off and then turning it back on, and it'll be the new size, so there will be downtime. But if it has to destroy something and then rebuild it, it will let you know, be like, hey, for I guess, what is something that does that? A lot of the autoscale group stuff, it actually has to delete it and then rebuild it, and it will tell you, I'm going to delete this and then rebuild it. So ye be warned. And most of that stuff that it's designed for that, so it doesn't affect much, but at least it tells you, so you know what's going on.
And you guys don't use Terraform to actually install any Drivewyze software, right? You just use this for setting up the servers?
Yeah, this is just for setting up servers. For applications, or our applications on those servers, we use a mixture of Terraform and some custom script, or sorry, not Terraform, Salt. So if I hop over to that.
Yeah, I've never heard of Salt either, so forgive my ignorance.
Yeah, I learned about Terraform and SaltStack from Paul Redanis. He's a contractor that helped us move to Amazon. So he was a big fan of Salt, and Salt is pretty neat. It's all YAML, so if you don't like spaces, you know, it makes it hard, but it's quite neat. You can just like set it up. You can you just push it to your repository, and then the master will check out the changes and then apply them. You can change it so that it's not on auto apply, but you can push and pull and that kind of stuff. So there's all these things. So like you can target stuff. So from your one machine, you can like access everything, just like pop and whatnot. So salt grains ls. So this will list all the grains that you have, and grains are, I believe, ways of targeting things. I'm a little fuzzy. I haven't worked with this in a while, but it's kind of neat. It has a lot of information, or a lot of built-in components, and a lot of resources and stuff. So like it can set up users on machines just by config files. You don't have to set up any pieces yourself. It can also create what's called cron jobs, and put files onto the machine. So like you can store your config in here, and then have it get pulled down, and then do like a git pull to pull your code onto the machine. If you're using a scripting language or something. It's pretty good at what it does, but it kind of has the problem where when you pull it out of the box, it just kind of works. But then as soon as you need to do complicated things, so like if one state depends on another state, it automatically kind of does that until it doesn't. And then you end up starting to have to specify, this state relies on this state, and goes on, and then everything, you end up having to lay out everything yourself. Otherwise, it'll break, or it'll do weird things every once in a while. So we built a I called it test env autogen. So it would automatically spin up a new server with all our services on it for testing. And since it had to pull all the code and build everything, it took like, it could take 20 minutes to build a machine, which when you're coming from hand building them, that's pretty fast. But once you do that twice, you're like, well, I don't want to spend all my days doing this. But it would, every once in a while, it would just kind of like fall apart. It would break and be like, and the only way to like fix it would be to jump on and like take a look and like just rerun Salt, and then Salt would fix itself. Which is good that it just fixed itself, but it was kind of awkward, and you had to, tell people how to use Salt, a little more in depth. Our new version of T is KD, Kubernetes Test Autogen, and it just uses Kubernetes. It builds all the stuff with the kube config, and that's almost instant. It takes a couple seconds to build a new test environment, and because it doesn't have to pull the code, it just pulls it pulls a Docker image from each of the services and runs it. So having that separation between building an application and then like deploying it is really nice. And Salt, or at least how we were using Salt, it did not allow that to happen.
Okay, so now you have like Docker images with all the code and everything ready to go.
Yeah.
You have those wherever, and then basically you just run. Do you run Salt now to do that, or you have something that runs that basically spins up your whole Kubernetes cloud, just pulls your pre-compiled, ready to go Docker images. Like it doesn't build the Docker images, just pulls them and then runs them. Okay.
Yeah. So you can use Salt to pull down Docker containers too, which we've done that a couple times. And that's pretty efficient. It's a little more bulletproof than just pulling down, doing git pulls and stuff. or Git checkouts. But then you're left with like, how do I orchestrate all these containers? How do they talk to each other? How do we make sure that they're up, and if we need more or less? And Kube just kind of handles all that. So we've kind of strayed away from using Salt. If we can just have the worker machines get provisioned by Terraform, and then have Kubernetes handle all the application stuff, a lot of management just goes away.
Oh, okay. It sounds like you guys are working towards a pretty streamlined operation there.
Yeah, it's getting pretty good.
Oh, right on. Hey, and speaking of Docker, how do you manage? So I'm assuming that developers also use Docker, right? When they're developing, like they'll use they'll set their development environment using Docker, and then, or is that not true at Drivewyze?
We're getting there. Everyone is kind of in charge of their own setup. So I use Docker. I'm on a Mac, and every time I do a brew update, my Python changes, and it drives me nuts. So I use Docker for most things. And on my machine, I just have Docker Compose files. It's a really quick, easy way to get things up and running, repeatedly. And then we have some services that it's just easier to put them in a Docker container and have people use them. If it builds in a Docker container, then it'll run everywhere. Whereas, if you have some compiled code and you're trying to run it on a Linux machine or a Mac or Windows, and you just have to like fight with make files forever.
Oh, okay. Because my question was, but I don't know if you'll be able to answer it, is like you have a Dockerfile for development, but then how do you have a Dockerfile also for production? Like I'd like it if I could just have one Dockerfile for both that maybe just knows what environment you're in.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of people have 2 or 3 Docker, like a Docker environment or Dockerfile per environment or something like that. Like they'll have their production one and their development one.
I think the best practice is to have a single Docker container Dockerfile for everything. So what we do is we have a Dockerfile. Actually, here, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second and pull up a Dockerfile.
Yeah. Obviously, don't share anything you don't want to.
Yeah. No, but I think sharing a real example of a Dockerfile would be helpful, because the Docker docs are a little bit like, step 1, draw a circle, step 2, draw the rest of the owl, and they don't really link those two together.
Yeah, because I've tried setting up one that does. I've just kind of started playing around with it, and I find I have to write like if statements inside my Docker file using like it becomes a bash, like I'll have a bash command, like if it's development environment, install some debug tools. If it's not a development environment, then just install the stuff we need for production.
Right. Yes.
So I'm wondering if there's a better way, or if that's a good way to go, or.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. All right. So this is the Docker container for our main service, Drivewyze services, because we're good at naming things. So Docker files contain a couple core elements. So that's the from, which is what is the base image that you're going to be using. So that is a Docker image that someone has already set up. So we're using the official Python 3.6. It has, I think it's kind of it's a full-featured environment. So it has Python 3.6 built in as default. And it has a bunch of like other kind of utilities. So it's a little heavier than normal. You can use I think it's like the Python Alpine version, which will be super bare bones. So you jump in and it'll have jump into the container and have almost no utilities to do anything, but it's small and fast. So, and then you have to have the working directory. So that's where your code will be put, and that's where you'll be doing all your work. And then you have to copy things from your file system into the container that's being created. So right now, so here we're copying some dependency script and running it. So that's like those are some like I think this is an Ubuntu image, so it's installing some Ubuntu packages that we need to run. After that,
sorry to interrupt. Would you change that script depending if you're in development and production? Because you might want different dependencies in development, right?
Nope.
Okay.
So for us, this is production, load test, dev. We use this for everything. So this is like system dependencies, and then this installs our Python packages. So familiar with pip install, it does that, and then after that we copy our actual code from the the user's file system into the image. After that, it sets the command. So this here is what will happen if you go Docker run your image, and that's what it will use by default. So this is Docker images are done in layers. So this is layer 1. This doesn't really count as layer, but and then this is layer 2. This is layer 3, layer 4, layer 5, like that. There is a maximum number of layers that you can have. But in general, what you want to do is have the layers that change the least often, at the top of the file. So like our packages that we need for Ubuntu are, they'll rarely change. So we can do this, and then Docker will cache that layer. So, you build it once, and then it never has to talk to the internet to get that layer again. And then, the next thing that will change, less frequently will be Docker packages. So, or Python packages. You upgrade them, point release every once in a while, but like, it's not a big deal. Or like you don't want to upgrade them every day. Maybe do, but it keeps that cache, and then your code itself will be the one that changes most often. You'll be adding features, bug fixes. So when this file gets run, most of the time, all this stuff is cached and will never change. But just this layer will change, and that can cut down on your build times like immensely.
Okay.
You're not always, talking out to the internet to pull down, new software and whatnot. And then, so this is what we use. If the only difference between production and test is we will mount a file with our config in it. So really, it's only the config that changes between test and dev.
Like config for the application itself, like what database to use and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So if you're trying to do if you're doing development and you need like debug tools, actually I could see that being a separate Docker file. But once you get to like your testing phase, when you're handing it over to QA, at that point you want to keep the same file, and actually you want to keep the same Docker image.
Right.
I'll get to that in a second. But this is my Docker compose file. So this is what I use for testing, and what this means is it's going to build a service called Drivewyze services. It's just going to build from the local Docker file that's in that folder, and then it's going to mount the entire folder into the working directory. So that means that every time something changes in your file system, it'll change inside of the Docker container. Then we expose these ports, and then this entry point. So in the Docker file, we had that command that ran gunicorn. We're actually overriding that and specifying the entry point is going to be Python managed POI, which is the Django. what would you call it? The Django like development tools. And then we set the command to be run server, and it'll run, listening on all ports, or for all IPs on port 8000. So Python manage PY automatically reloads when it detects a change in the file system. So I can run this, go Docker compose up, and then make changes, and Python manage.py will automatically reload everything. So I can just, make a change, see it reload, refresh the page, and everything's there. So it's like pretty easy to get set up, and you don't have to worry about anything on your machine. It just kind of works. So we're going to jump back to multiple Docker files versus test and stuff like that. So what we actually have is when we push to GitLab, which is our Git service, there's a CI pipeline that reads the Docker file and builds a Docker container and pushes that to our repository, our container repository. We're just using ECR in Amazon. It then, when we need to do testing, we'll pull that Docker container down and run that. So, QA never actually has to look at a Docker file or build from a Docker file. It's using something that's already up and running. And then that, once, that container is gone through QA and it's been signed off, we can actually put that into production, and it's the exact same container. The code can't change, the dependencies can't change. The only thing that will, be explicitly changing is the config files to point to the production services rather than test. So you know exactly what is going in production. If you are deploying code just through Git, someone could accidentally push to master, or maybe something gets changed between test and deployment day. You never know. So Docker really, like, you can look at the container hash and be like, that's the container I want. I'm going to deploy that one. I know it has not changed.
Then how do you get the config file up into the Docker container when you run it? Do you pass in like a parameter or something like that?
There's a couple different ways. So you can use environment variables if your application is set up to read environment variables. But you can also do this this volumes thing. So what you could do, so if your config file was sort of in the root of your application, you would just mount new config file to the user source app config .json.
Oh, so you just mount that. You wouldn't mount the whole directory. You just mount that one specific file. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
exactly.
And you do that
overwrites.
in the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it just overwrites the single file. Very similar to when you mount directories and files, in a Linux system. It just kind of like hides everything underneath it, and you can only look at the thing that's been mounted.
Okay, and you would do that in your command line when you did like Docker run, my awesome image, and then you pass in the volume command there.
You can do that. You can do it from the Docker command. You can do it in Docker Compose. You can also do it in Kubernetes.
Okay.
Kubernetes has a way to mount files directly into the image. So basically, no matter what service you use for orchestrating your Docker container, whether it's nothing or Kubernetes, you can do that.
So maybe what I'll do, because that was very interesting. I'm learning lots. So maybe what I'll do, maybe I'll share my screen, because I tried to set up one for Ruby, and then like I said, I had a bunch of like if statements in here
Okay.
And maybe we can pick it apart a bit. Okay, so I think I can steal control from you here. Oh, you stopped sharing?
I stopped sharing, so yeah, you're good to go.
Share. All right, can you see that?
I can't.
Right, so this is for a little Ruby app that I'm playing around with.
Mm-hmm.
And so the problem was when I got to here, like sorbet is like a new kind of Ruby type checker, but
Yeah.
I guess you could install it in development too, but I kind of only wanted it um, for in production, but I only wanted it for development, at least for now, just to play around with it. And I wasn't sure a
Mm-hmm.
way to do that aside from having two separate Docker files. And then same thing when you run the bundle install, right? Like you want, or when you do yarn, you want to make sure you don't cache everything. So that's why I broke these out into if statements.
Yeah. Um, so for for the type checker, is that at runtime that it is used, or does it like
It can do both, but right now I'm just playing with it as a static type checker.
okay?
So that's why I only want it for development.
Mm-hmm. I would probably I would probably have two different Docker containers. Now, I'm not an expert and I don't know what the best practice is, but I think it'd probably make more sense to have two Docker files, one for like development that allows you to have new tools and stuff without having to install them on your on your computer, and then you would have an image that would be built for like giving to other people.
So, and there's a way, because some of this stuff here, like this, like a bunch of this stuff is going to be like, at least this part here will be common, right? No matter what. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I was trying not to do is, and then some of this other stuff, like, copying over it's like some of this stuff is going to be common for development and production. Is there a way to, so I don't want to have two Docker files, but I was trying to avoid having two Docker files. And I remember having to go like, oh, if I need to change something, like a package, then I have to change it in both files. And then I'd forget.
Right. So what you could do is have there's a thing what's it called there's like a Docker build image or something like that. What's it called? So it's a way you can have an image that builds things and then it dumps things into another Docker container. It's probably not quite the thing that you want.
Oh.
So one way you could do what you want to, instead of having two files that are almost the same that you have to build, is you can actually you could build a base container that has it'd probably be like it'd have the working dir, it would install the main dependencies that you need, your gem files, and you'd probably just install like for your package.json, probably just install the production version, unless you need to unless you want to see the unminified versions or something. But you'd have that all in one one Docker file. You would build that and push that to your repository, and then and then for development, you could have that image, or you could build from that image and add your extra stuff that you want. So it'd be kind of like a hierarchy.
Right.
And you just have the pieces in there, and then you could overwrite the entry point and set all that stuff up.
Oh, okay. So basically, I have a minimal production ready Docker image. And then when I want to use it for development, take that Docker image, maybe like run stuff like this on it.
Yeah.
And then, everyone's for debugging sometimes. It might be nice to have some of this source depending on what you need, but oh, okay. I could try that. So you still have two Docker files, but then I wouldn't have the problem where if I had to update something, I would forget to do it in both. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming there's a way like an include up here. Oh no, you would just do a from Chris's super awesome Docker file up here instead of from Ruby 2.6 or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. So that it will mean you have to store your container in a repository, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a way to do it locally. I haven't played with that, so I'm not really sure. And I'm trying to think of other ways. I know with like stuff that like you have to like you build and package, it's a little different. If it's just like a Python project where you install it, it's relatively easy. Trying to find the docs for the build argument thing that I was talking about.
Oh, okay. No, I like your idea of the two, like the base file, the base production file, and then you can spin off a development one. Yeah, because you're right. You would use the same Docker image for staging, for test staging, and for production. Well, I guess it depends. For test, for me, is usually running unit tests, so that one might have some of these development tools in it too. But
yeah,
but you basically build that production one, and then the development one is built off of that one. Okay.
For us, our like with Python, our unit tests are kind of in with the rest of our project. So we build the Docker file, and then we execute the tests in that Docker file. So once the unit tests have completed inside of that file, that's when we push it up to the ECR.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, okay. Cool. I'll have to try that. Well, thank you. Yeah, this was just my example, just playing around, trying to figure it out. And these if statements were getting pretty ugly. It's getting a little hard to manage. So.
Another pointer, just they recommend doing as much in each run statement as possible. So you instead of running individual commands, so installing the gems in one place and then installing other dependencies in other, you might want to install all those in one place. It depends on how often each line will get changed. Because if you have some things that are going to be changed often, then you'll want them in a different line than other ones. So you could probably combine your gem file, running the gem install and the yarn install, and that way you could have two things, unless they are updated at different times. If the yarn gets upgraded or if package.json is changed more frequently, then maybe you want to split it apart. But you want to keep it sort of as few layers as possible if you can.
Just avoid the Docker bloat where your hard drive starts running out of space because you have so many Docker images.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Cool. Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, I work a lot right now with legacy code with a client that I subcontract with. So we use Docker images all the time because we have to pull down old versions of Ruby or whatever. And just having those on your machine, like multiple versions of that would be really tricky to do. So I've been a big fan for using it for development, but I haven't had an opportunity to use it in production yet. So I was curious about how that would work.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's at least what you know how I've done it. I could be completely wrong, but it seems to be working so far.
Oh no, I don't know. Drivewyze, you guys got a lot of customers and a lot of like your I don't know how much traffic do you guys get a day? I don't know if you can say, or like
Um,
megabits or gigabits or
let's see, what do we
number of
have?
users, requests, I don't know, something.
Yeah, we have, I think, close to like 150,000 trucks
Oh, okay.
per day.
And it's
Um,
very real time for Drivewyze, like because they need to I, for people that don't know, they need to like signal. The signal needs to be sent from the truck to some post before they get to the weigh scale, which is like what, like a minute away or something like that.
yeah, yeah. Like we start communications about 2 miles away, and miles because it's the States. And then, yeah, try to get the instruction back as fast as possible. Sometimes we have to like do more communications closer because we integrate with weigh in motion. So it's a scale that can read the weight of the truck as it goes over it. And those are
Oh,
often relatively close to the scale, like the stationary scale of the station. So I just posted another link. It was just like the first thing I could find talking about what it did. So if you have a file that actually compiles, you can do multi-stage builds. So you would go from base image as builder, you build stuff, and then it will create an artifact that can get copied into a new container that is perhaps smaller. I think it's a little tangential to what you're working with, like with development packages versus production packages, but
hmm.
it is a neat thing, especially if you're like I know you do a lot of .NET stuff. This would be a way of build it. You could have a .NET build container, build your artifact, copy it over to an Alpine Linux, which is really, really tiny, and then really the entire container only has your binary in it. It doesn't have all the compilers and everything else.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So yeah, I basically use Docker as your as your compiling machine, as your build machine, and just
Mm-hmm.
take the executable. Oh, okay. Huh. That'd be interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to try and see if we can't get a client or eventually one of our legacy clients there. Because a lot of times they just run their final app on hardware or whatever, kind of like a bunch of Amazon services somewhere. So it'd be nice to see
Mm-hmm.
if we can get them. We have our development Docker image and get them eventually propagated upwards. So that'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
I guess so. We got about 8 minutes left. I guess my one last question is: I know Drivewyze does a bunch of mobile development as well, right? Like you guys have tons of mobile apps. How do you do what's your CI look like for compiling? Because you compile Android, iOS, um, some old Windows versions, if I remember correctly, some really old uh,
Yeah.
mobile Windows. I don't know if they really call them phones or what you would call them, but
Yeah, it's like Windows CE, and then we also have some Windows EC, which are like I think the Windows 7 version. And then I think we have now I think most of our newer customers are modern stuff, but like still there's some Windows .NET that works. Um, so I haven't done a whole lot of the mobile stuff for like the compiling and deployment. I know for Android we have a CI pipeline that it has a Docker container that builds an APK and then runs their unit tests on that. I don't know if we have that actually connected to like the store to like automatically publish. That might still be a manual process. Just because like there's all the certificate signing and things like that. And Apple's always difficult. So I think most of that is manual as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was going to ask, do you automatically sign your apps during the build, or is that someone does it manually after the fact?
I'm pretty sure someone does it manually. But I think I've only deployed a mobile app to production, once, and that was on a hobby project about 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I've set some, like, again, more like test builds for myself to see if I could do it. And it was always more complicated because you needed a Mac somewhere because you had to compile your iOS build. Like I was using Xamarin, so you had to compile your iOS build on a Mac. And then you had to have all that networked and set up correctly. And it was a little more struggle than it seemed like it needed to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Well, thanks, Grant. That was
No
great.
problem.
Yeah. So we'll post. Well, I don't know. Hopefully, I don't have to edit this or anything, and we'll just post this video. But thank you very much for volunteering to answer questions. Hopefully,
problem.
we can get you on in a couple of months, and our goal is to get this mentorship thing kind of going, and hopefully, more people will come in and ask questions. So I don't know if it's a time thing or what it is, but yeah. But thank you very much. You helped me a lot, so. That was very, yeah, it's just very interesting to hear about, it was very interesting to hear about Drivewyze's setup. Because I know they're such a new company and you guys have grown like so quickly. So, and the fact that you're real-time communication where I think a lot of websites think they need to react fast, but it's like, well, this truck, if he drives by the waste and we don't talk to him fast enough, that's a loss of business for us. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Grant. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And if you have any questions, feel free to find me on the dev-edmonton Slack. I'm always there to answer questions.
Yeah, and you're involved in both the dev-edmonton mobile and the dev-edmonton DevOps one, both those Slack channels and meetups, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
if you have questions, you can like post them into either of those. Like the DevOps one, is pretty active and people are always willing to help out. So that's a good way to get, a lot of help.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you very much again. Yeah. And so stay busy.
Always do.
Take care, Grant.
All right. See ya.